Yeah.
you know?
What is it that happened that caused us to, does anything come up for you of what it is that happened that caused this massive change in the past 30 years?
So being in the US, I have a US kind of based narrative because I'm aware that the idea of, you know, it wasn't even considered gender equality, previously, but just to say feminist ideals have been present for hundreds of years, thousands maybe. The idea of, hey, we should be able to do a little bit more of this, a little more of that, a little less of this. That's just human politics, right? Like we all do that. Where it's workers' rights, everything is not a revolution. Some things are just progress. There was a time in the United States, we could say 40s to 80s, that 40-year period of 1940 to 1980 of massive social change, that there was a spirit of change. There was a spirit of revolution. There was a spirit of changing the social order. And I believe the dark forces, the darkest, most extreme forces, just took advantage of the opportunity. It's like, oh, the stove is hot. Let me add something to the meal. And I believe the cultural backdrop of, you going from enslaved African people in Americas to Jim Crow, and then you have, women's rights, voting rights, all these things are kind of coming into form that are creating the new social order. You have monetary policy changing, even the United States itself coming into a more power-based state in the global economy and the global military construct. So you have this world power being born in the United States, and you have women coming to more power, and then it just kind of shifted in that 60s period to where we want to have, more sexual liberation, more like it. I would say that the number one thing would be traditionally separation from religious ideals. Not necessarily any particular religion, but it's known throughout history. If you look at any civilization that self-destructed, they start going away from their moral code that made them, form a collective group. So when the group starts diversifying their ideas, typically they self-destruct because there's too much chaos ensuing and the culture ends up like just imploding. So you add that feminist ideals from the 60s, not necessarily the early 1900s or 1800s, but this new phenomenon that came on the back of this social change in America. And America's number one export is culture. It's not any product. It's we influence a lot of things just by the culture and the mass production of Hollywood and the media. We're very, very heavy on controlling narratives. And there are people who are ahead of people controlling narratives. So the narrative of, hey, we want to have a more sexually, exclusive society. We can do what we want. We have more contraception. We have Planned Parenthood. We have all these different aspects that kind of open up the sexual Pandora's box. And the thing about sex and why that's so crucial that I try to explain to people is that it's not about sex. It's about what sex represented. Sex was always a risk of pregnancy. But if anything else, it was just a risk of pregnancy. We didn't have condoms, we didn't have birth control, we had pills, shots, all these things we did not have. So it was a risk of pregnancy. And of course, there was shame around being a mother and not being married at some time ago. As that has shifted, it didn't shift really until we removed the fear of pregnancy. Once you remove that fear, you kind of open up, okay, now I can have sex with people that I wouldn't deem suitable partners. That's the door that opens up. Obviously, no one thinks that consciously, that we're like, no one planned on that happening. I don't believe so consciously. Maybe it's the forces behind it did, but I don't think anyone was like, okay, now I can have sex with people that I don't look at as good partners. But that's what happened, because now my guard is a little bit lower because I'm not filtering that process out. So of course you're going to have children who are born to parents who aren't necessarily prepared, especially when it comes to men who aren't trained to be X, Y, Z ways to provide for a family. So that's like a second order consequence, right? Like the consequence is like sexual discipline, what that means for yourself spiritually. But the second order consequence is, well, what about the men who aren't ready? What do those women have to suffer through? What do those men have to suffer through? What do the children have to suffer through? The community, society. And it takes a little bit of time for that to kind of actually play out. So in the first 5-10 years, you don't really notice anything. It's like, oh, we got kids, and we're making it, we're trying to make it work, and you have divorce becoming more normalized. So you have a lot of different things that are based on kind of uprooting tradition of men and women. And so as that is distorted, you have this like tailwind of second wave, third wave, fourth wave feminism that's pushing further and further and further on the dynamic. And I always tell people feminine energy is always going to be expanding. That's why you need masculine energy to kind of contain it, because it will keep going until you say, okay, that's as far as we should probably go with this idea. And no one has, really made that claim of this may be too far, because there is always going to be a further expansion. So it's not that the expansion is necessarily inherently bad. It's just it has gone unchecked, because we're just now really seeing the results of it 20, 30, 40 years later. That, and now I think there is a time of we need to reflect and say, okay, we have an increase of mothers reporting this. We have an increase of fathers with not in the home. We have an increase of children who are going through this. Like something isn't working here on a family level. And if we want to improve as a society, we have to look at the family structure and look at those data points and say, what can we improve? And I don't think, the government should say, hey, we're going to outlaw extramarital sex. No, I think it's a consciousness thing that humans have to, with new freedom comes new responsibility. So we have this freedom now, but now you have the right as a sovereign being to choose who's in your energy field, who's going to be around you, and what to look for. And it goes back to those traditional components of, wow, what, the things that we have gotten away from are the things we got to get back to, because those are the things that we're actually looking for. Men typically still desire feminine women. Women still typically desire masculine men. It's just that in the middle, like there's a time where we feel like we're ready to settle down, and the time where we want to just have fun, or just we want to date, want to go out, and those people don't align with the end mission. And I feel like we're a directionless society right now. Most people, we don't have a firm grasp over the human life cycle and what it means, because even the life cycle has gotten longer, so we expect to live a longer time. So we're a little more casual, in the beginning, where when people were expected to live until 40, everything was kind of like, we got to get this done. It was just, this is the life cycle. So we have 80 years now. So like, okay, we got double the time. We got time to mess around and make this mistake or do this, and it's not to say that we are not meant to make mistakes. It's just that, are we now reflecting on them? Because the past is the past. What happened has happened. But how do we want to move forward, and what do we actually think is the most beneficial thing? And I think that's an argument or conversation for people to have. It's like, do you think your idea about how the world functions will actually lead to a better society based on what results? Because I don't know anyone who can just say, hey, I think women who don't have any protection outside themselves will do better. It's like, I don't see how anyone can argue that. If they talk to 100 women who are doing it on their own, it may seem empowering and people can say congratulations, but at the end of the day, like, that person, just as a human being, we're meant to couple, so that they need support. And I just don't think I don't know what is it about that aspect that we kind of applaud the woman who struggles her way up to success versus the person who's supported throughout their journey. It's like almost like it's cheapened if you have support. You know, it's like, oh,
Yeah.
but you didn't really work that hard for it. It's like, well, why do we want women to work the hardest they possibly can to get something? It's like, why are we obsessed with this? Have to hustle, have to break your back to get somewhere
Mm.
idea when it comes to women. I just don't understand that. But